everybody. Welcome back to the channel. This is Edan of LightCycleAstrology.com. Today, we are going to talk about some horoscope interpretations for all 12 rising signs for the house that Pluto has moved into as of yesterday on Thursday. And we're going to get into some basic interpretations just based on some house topics for a god that is about transformation and a theme that runs through kind of the ways in which Pluto tends to have these long-term dismantling kinds of effects over the course of, decades as this transit goes through a new house. And we're going to get into a little bit of how potentially Pluto was transforming matters of life through the previous house and how those matters are coming to an end as Pluto enters this new place in your birth chart based on your rising sign. So first of all, I want to thank everybody for all of the well-wishers. I made a post that I had a newborn baby come last Sunday night, and it's been an absolute overwhelming event of emotional love and support from people all around. And it's just been an incredible experience. And on a personal note, I want to just share with you kind of I don't know if you would call it a revelation or what you might call it, but it's really interesting for me on a personal level because my firstborn was born 8 years ago. And I knew astrology. I had been practicing astrology for that point, even semi-professionally for, about 10 years previously to that. But I was practicing modern astrology and I didn't have any formal education in it. I was just sort of self-taught and, which is a really good thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when I experienced my firstborn's birth at the hospital, of course, as an astrologer, it's a very important moment. You're witnessing a new life come into being and there's going to be a new birth chart associated with that life. But I didn't really have the knowledge that I had this time around. So this experience has been so profound on so many different levels that it's hard to even articulate it, besides just the emotionality of it and how wonderful and special it is to, have somebody come into your life that is a child of yours that you're going to love for, all eternity. It's just an amazing moment that you just weep for, with tears of joy. But the really interesting thing for me about this was that with the depth of, I guess, practice and experience and formal training that I have now had in traditional astrology, watching the moment itself of the birth chart was something that really hit me hard. So that's what I wanted to share was just like, as people that are interested in astrology and how the archetypes of astrology show up around us or emerge out of our birth charts, it's really just a whole nother thing to, as a parent or as a friend or family member of somebody that is in the hospital having birth, anybody that has that experience that is familiar with astrological archetypes and how astrology shows up in the world, it's so profoundly amazing that we spend so much time as people who practice and learn astrology looking at birth charts, which are essentially just a frozen moment in time. But to live in the moment when the birth chart is being created as that new being comes into the world is just immensely powerful. So what I noticed this time around that was just so incredible is how I wasn't just examining a chart. I wasn't just looking at a computer program, or I wasn't going outside and seeing planets in the sky like I do sometimes. I was actually living in the archetypal energies that were around at that moment. And then later, as I examined my newborn's birth chart, I was able to connect the dots, how certain experiences that I felt or that was happening around me that my wife felt, how those experiences tied in with the instantaneous omen of divine fate or destiny of the moment as it unfolded. There's a sense in which we just really don't control fate or destiny. And it's really hard for me to walk away from that, even questioning that, how much is in our control, you know? Of course, as both of us, as newborn, you know, as the parents of a newborn, excuse me, you know, we're of course watching the time, and we're hoping for really good movements of planets or rising signs that we prefer or don't prefer. We're waiting for things like that to happen. We're holding out, you know. And so the people in the hospital thought we were quite eccentric on that level, because we kept asking them, you know, when is your estimate? When do you think that baby might come? Like, how long does labor usually take? If she's this dilated, okay, now she's this dilated, how much longer? And there were certain things that just happened that made us look eccentric, because we were watching the chart as it unfolded. But in a deeper way, just seeing the moment unfold and having that experience to see the archetypes, the archetypal energies of rising signs and planets and things like that, just sort of present and around us, that would then go on to form the omen picture of a being's birth chart as she first emerged into the world. It's like a three-dimensional experience, you know. It's amazing on so many levels. So that being said, I just wanted to, I guess, share that with you, ramble on a little bit, and thank everybody who has congratulated us. We're so happy, and the baby is very healthy, and she's beautiful, and she's perfect so far. She's doing really good, and we're just trying to get 2 or 3 hours of sleep whenever we can, because of course newborns need a lot of feeding continuously throughout the day and throughout the night. So I'm running on a couple of hours of sleep intermittently for the last 3 or 4 days. So hopefully this video comes off coherent. Now, if you like the channel and the video today, please go ahead and like and share and subscribe. All that, it really helps the channel to grow. And you can also, if you're ever interested in a consultation with me, they're about a week out from the time that you schedule them, but you can always go to lightcycleastrology.com, my website, and send me a message if you're interested in any kind of consultation service. Okay, so let's get into the topic now that I've poured my heart out. Let's get into some rising sign horoscopes for Pluto in Aquarius. So wherever Aquarius, that sign, is landing or occupying in your chart in terms of the house system. We use whole sign house systems on this channel from the traditional sense, but wherever Aquarius is occupying, whatever house that is occupying in your chart based on your rising sign, we're going to go through all 12 rising signs and give just a very, very general couple of few concepts that hopefully get the ball rolling. Now, I will say this: in preparing for this video, I examined Pluto running through my third house over the last or previous 16 years. And it was tricky, I'll say, because it's such a long span of time. It was really tricky to watch these very key moments that had connection with third house kinds of topics, to see the ways in which Pluto had really transformed my life, how I had gone into that period 16 years ago, and how I had come out of it just right now. You definitely see the topics coming in very profound ways. But it's a little tricky because the time span is so long. So that is one thing to keep in mind. So we're basically going to just get into a few of the basic house topics as they were assigned through more traditional models of ancient astrology. And we're just going to sort of delineate from there. But what I do recommend is wherever Capricorn falls in your chart in terms of the house, I would go back 16 years ago. I think it's about 2008 or so when Pluto moved into that sign. And I would start to take the theme of basic transformation. How do these very powerful moments that sometimes come, how did they transform? How did you enter your life from 2008, and how have things changed since then? And what are the ways in which you could see those particular house topics being the vehicle for that change, or being, the representative of symbolic change? So that's what we're going to get into today. But I do recommend going through that. It'll give you a sense, because normally on the channel, what we're doing is when we do like rising sign videos, or we're delineating some kind of aspects in the sky, they're shorter aspects, and it's just a little bit easier to see how those might play out. But over the course of the next 20 years, if I say something like, oh, Pluto's in your first house, it's going to bring about some personal change. Well, who isn't going to change over the course of 20 years? So we have to be really careful about how we articulate that kind of concept. But basically what we're going to do is take the symbolism of Pluto, which has to do with very slow and deep transformational change that often brings with it moments of great intensity, a dark night of the soul, and a way in which we don't get them. It's not a continuous thing. So when we talk about Pluto running through a house, it's not going to be like intense Pluto third house kinds of things for the next 20 years nonstop. It's going to be just a few times, or a few things that come up that you deal with maybe over the course of some weeks or some months or whatever, or maybe even years. But there are going to be very specific moments as Pluto runs through that house that you're going to be able to sort of connect the dots in terms of the topics of related to that house. So it won't be the whole time. So first of all, a disclaimer: Pluto is, of course, a very heavy kind of planet to talk about, and Plutonian energy usually brings a certain amount of fear to people. So as we talk about these house topics and Pluto running through them, I worry that I'm going to make people panic and feel fear, like their life is going to devolve into some, incredible disaster and everything is going to fall apart. So I don't want that image to stay with you. But I do want to try to articulate very specific moments that could have that characteristic of transformation on a level that is oftentimes pretty intense, pretty dark night of the soul. Pluto's job, in my view of things, is to sort of take something and deconstruct it, completely take it apart. And of course, I'm not the only one that thinks this. Many astrologers sort of have this view of Pluto, but what Pluto is doing is, as it simultaneously breaks something down, it is using those pieces to rebuild something into a new form. But I think the key concept, for me at least, is that this process of something that is breaking down and simultaneously being atomized so that new parts can be reformed, I think the key concept really is something like, you have to imagine that it's total. It's not like partial. We're talking about, it almost reminds me of that old Superman movies from the 80s with Christopher Reeve, where he goes through a complete restructuring, and he comes out, kind of mortal. And then I forget the plot, but essentially he loses his powers at some point, and he like deconstructs. And it was this wonderful 80s, like, special movie effects that you got to watch Christopher Reeve losing Superman and becoming mortal. And then at some point he finds the way back, and he can become Superman again. And he goes literally from like an alien to a human mortal to back to an alien. That, for me, really has kind of the essence of Pluto. In fact, even the original Superman comic came out in the 1930s, right around the period where Pluto was discovered. So that's very interesting. So I think Pluto itself actually does have kind of a Superman theme attached to it. But that's just a side note. But in any way, I think the important thing to remember with Pluto is that everybody's going to throw around the word transformation, something that is transforming. That's really hard to understand, I think. But what it really is, I think, is, yes, it's transformation, but think of it as like total. So you go in, Pluto goes into a particular house, and by the time Pluto leaves that house in the next 20 years, that certain things that relate to those house topics change in such a way that there isn't anything left. There's literally nothing left with particular aspects that related to that house. It is, you come out the other side completely reformed in those particular ways. So, okay, now let's go ahead and real quick, let's bring up the real-time clock so we can just take a look at Pluto in the sign of Aquarius now. And let's go ahead and put Aries on the ascendant here. If you are in Aries rising, Pluto has just left your 10th house in Capricorn and entered your 11th whole sign house. So again, we're using whole sign houses. So the whole sign is basically making a house if you're using that house system. Okay, so if you were born with the ascendant rising anywhere in the sign of Aries, if you have any degree of an Aries ascendant, whether it's the 1st degree or the 29th degree, that makes your first house the whole sign of Aries, which makes Pluto entering the whole sign of Aquarius, and it's making that entire sign the 11th house. So let me just go ahead and pull up my notes. So for Aries rising people out there, I am thinking that Pluto enters the 11th house. Now, the 11th house traditionally was called the place of good spirit in the chart. And so we begin to run into themes that there might be things that are slowly broken down and then rebuilt in a completely new form. But what kind of things is that going to be about? It could be about aspirations for the future. It could be social direction, in terms of like Pluto goes into the 11th house and you have a certain social collective pattern that you're in now, who you hang out with, what kind of friends you have, who are your work colleagues, who are the people that are just around you socially that you have built a life around. You have, there's an established life. There are certain people that are established in there, and those people connect to you in a certain way. And in the 11th house way, that is going to be some way or another about potentially people that support you, friends that want to see you succeed, colleagues at work that you get along with, anybody that brings in the form of like a good spirit, somebody that wants to help. But so this house deals with this social dimension. And when Pluto enters, it's very, very likely that in 20 years from now, if you look back at the kinds of social people, if you look back at the social dimension, you'll see how the kinds of people you were around probably are unrecognizable to the kind that you hang around with by the end of this period. So for sure, there is that social transformation. So that's a big part of Pluto entering the 11th. But of course, there could be like long-term aspirations that slowly break down at first. So with all of these rising sign delineations, at first we're going to see something slowly deconstructing. Something has to be broken down. So are there aspirations that are just going to be beginning to slowly become dismantled? And it might be intense. It might feel like you're wandering aimlessly and you don't know what you should do. And that could be really scary. But it's all for the purposes at the end of this transit that you cannot use those same people. Maybe you cannot engage socially with the same kinds of groups, or there isn't the same kinds of goals that you want, that you're trying to chase after. Those things have to be broken down, and then the pieces have to be rebuilt, and they're going to be rebuilt in such a way that you come out the other side being around new people, being around people that are connected to the things that you want, that are somehow really transformed by this period. So that's what I would look for, just general themes that are social, that have to do with long-term ambitions or goals, maybe professionally or just at least with your life. I would start there, and I would try to see maybe, now Pluto came out of the 10th house of careers. So I would sort of look back 16 years, 2008 to now, and see if there is some kind of pattern with Pluto restructuring reputation professionally, or the ways in which you were achieving things in the life, or the kinds of careers or work that you were engaged in, the kind of practice that you were involved in. Now that those transformative moments are largely coming to an end, but it's as if I wonder if those things that have transformed surrounding the topics of career, achievements, professional gains and reputation, or life success, if those somehow lead you on to needing to change certain things about the social dynamics, needing to come to new goals or aspirations within your life, because those things have changed since Pluto went through the 10th. So I would sort of start there with some themes, and this is just meant to get the ball rolling. As you put some of the past together, I think you'll get the gist of maybe where this is headed. Okay, now let's go ahead and put Taurus on the ascendant here. And this is going to move Pluto into your 10th house if you are a Taurus rising. And so for Taurus rising, this makes me wonder, like we were just talking about this god of transformation moving into a house that is associated with the day-to-day actions that we take to do what it is we want to do with our life. It's a very public place. It is a place of practice. So it's not, a lot of people think the 10th house is only like this keyword of career, but it can be anything that you're practicing. If you're trying to achieve anything and you're practicing daily on that thing and it has some worldly effect on you, that's a 10th house kind of thing. So you also have a connection with reputation. And the 10th house was associated with the place that was the most visible personal aspect to yourself. It's kind of the ancient traditional astrological equivalent of like what people usually associate today with the modern first house. But, where you get some sense of like, when people first see you, what do they see? Well, in traditional astrology, that was more the 10th, because it was like who you were out in the public. It's going to be those parts of your character that seem to show up and become exemplified there. So there could be very, very deep transformation. At first, there might be a breakdown of public character or reputation. There could be a breakdown of what you're practicing, or the kind of work that you're doing day to day, or the kind of practice that you're doing day to day. Of course, there might be successes now that seem to break down and go away. This is all for the purposes, of course, of Pluto rebuilding what it is that becomes successful for you or is successful for you, what forms of success come, what forms of public reputation. An example of this could simply be a lot of times, if somebody gets married, sometimes their spouse brings them into a new category of reputation or of status. Sometimes parenthood will do that. Will bring you into a new category of like, okay, well, we used to know Joe, but now Joe's a father. And so there's a whole nother status that is recognized. And of course, so any kind of change in reputation, that's a 10th house kind of thing. So this is a long, long process. So of course, over the next 20 years, most people will, of course, change jobs. Their reputation will go through a period of transformation. But when you have Pluto running through the 10th house, those things go through periods or moments where there is very intense, cathartic, subterranean kind of explosive, difficult or dismantling, painful kinds of changes within that 10th house realm. So, and you shouldn't be scared of these, because that's just what Pluto, that's how he breaks things down. He's not satisfied with just kind of changing them on the surface a little bit. He wants to completely destroy them so that he can rebuild them. When Pluto moves into the 11th out of your 10th house, you'll emerge with a stronger, more powerful, dynamic reputation. Successes will be under your belt that have been hard won. So these are the images that I get with Pluto running through the 10th house. Let's go ahead and put Gemini on the ascendant. Okay. And so if you are a Gemini rising, this is going to make Pluto enter your 9th house, traditionally called the house of God. And it's coming or leaving from out of the 8th house, a place that was called the gateway of Hades. So very interesting language. Pluto enters the place that is called the place of God and leaves the place that is called the place of Hades, or the gateway of Hades. Very, very interesting, since Pluto is a god of Hades. So the previous period of intense transformation that occurred in difficult areas of life that possibly dealt with death, debt, inheritance, fears, failures, the entanglement of resources with other peoples, that is largely wrapping up right now. Somehow 16 years ago, 2008, there was a long, slow process that went underway where there was potentially people that you lost, people that died. I know 2 Gemini risings, and one had an ex-boyfriend commit suicide, and another had a major thing that lasted many, many years with family inheritance and splitting up assets, and it was very intense. So there are themes that are wrapping up now with these 8th house kind of entanglements with resources oftentimes, but it could be with debt, death, fears. It could be even with health problems, especially mental kinds of health problems. But there is a period that is shifting away from those types of things right now. And it's as if Pluto is saying, okay, we have gone through these very difficult 8th house kinds of transformative moments, and we've learned what we can learn from those. We've detangled from certain kinds of people that we're indebted to or indebted to us. We've formed new webs of entanglement to people. We sort of formed new connections, and that is largely finishing up now. Now this power of transformation will come through the 9th house, and those often bring experiences of higher perspectives, the kinds of experiences that you haven't had before. And they could be very powerful experiences that relate to faith or personal principles, like the kind of principles that guide you, belief, maybe even religion or spirituality. Of course, we find the 9th house is connected to astrology and divination as well. So basically, I think Pluto is saying, I'm going to break down your faith. I'm going to break down your perspectives. I'm going to break down your sense of how everything fits together in your life, in terms of where do you fit in the world? Where do you fit in your life? Where do you fit in the cosmos? What is the cosmos? All of these very higher philosophical questions that guide personal principles of action, and are also guiding that higher connection that we have to spirit, to God, to divination. So it makes me wonder if there is going to be a period where at first it seems maybe a little bit dark, like you don't know what to believe. You don't know what you believe. You don't know how to connect to God or to connect to source. And you come out the other side having a very powerful, established kind of knowing, where you really, by that point, do know exactly how to connect with something higher, how to understand your place in the cosmos or in the world or in your life. You know what perspectives are providing some sort of guidance for your overall, direction as a soul, traveling not only through life, but just traveling as a soul being, outside of any worldly aspirations. So that is very, very cool type of transformation to have. Of course, Pluto being such a slow moving planet, not everybody would get that kind of experience, because Pluto is only going to travel through a couple of signs during the course of any one lifetime. So I would look for, by the end of this 20-year period, maybe very interesting experiences, potentially with traveling to religious or spiritual places, meditational practices, things that sort of enhance or bring enlightenment. I would look for themes that are like that going forward. Okay, now if you are a Cancer rising, this is going to have Pluto entering your 8th house and leaving out of your 7th house. So the language here from traditional astrology was saying that this god of the underworld of transformation is entering the house that was called the gateway of Hades and was leaving a place that was called the setting place of the 7th house. So very, very interesting. We have most likely a period where Pluto was working his transformational magic in over the previous 16 years in relationships, in marriage, in perhaps legal partnerships, even among certain areas that you have to compete against other people. The 7th house is a place of having to compete against like a one-on-one type of opponent. So were there experiences that had that competitive feel that were very that you learned a lot from, that really took you into some very profound places that caused some deep transformation in the space of relationships, just in general, but it could be within a marriage or legal partnership, business partner. And it even could be with, like, maybe for some Cancer rising people, they were perhaps living abroad. And how did that provide transformative experiences back to the soul? That is all largely finishing up now, and now begins a period of dismantling the current web of entanglements to slowly build a new web of entanglements. Topics that may come up are the receiving of or paying off that which is owed. And of course, I think that with Pluto in the 8th, we could also bring in the topic of fears. Fears of death, fears of being inadequate, fears of being pulled or held down against your will in certain areas in life. You see here these a little bit more intense themes of the 8th house are coming through. The 8th house is a place that has this sense of like being held down. And that's because if you look at what happens, the 8th house in time, as the world spins, it is brought down to the 7th, and eventually it sets below the horizon. So the symbolism of the 8th house is one that is struggling to sort of remain in the world, but a place that is will inevitably bring things down to the setting. There's nothing you can do about it. Certain things will be lost, certain things will be gained. So if somebody cosmically owes you a debt, that's where you get that connection with the 8th house and, say, inheritances. But ways in which you are entangled with other people, other souls, the karma, it's almost like a karmic kind of thing. There's a settling of debts away from you and towards you that happens. And so Pluto will work his transformative magic by first, I imagine, detangling or disintegrating the current status quo of how everything is set up in your life in terms of who depends on you, how do they depend on you, who do you depend on, how do you depend on them, who do you like sort of count on in terms of this or that. All of those things could begin to undergo a period where they sort of disintegrate. So, like, for instance, this might be a moment where there could be somebody that it has a partner, right? And the partner's job changes and maybe there's not as much finances. And so the partnership has to go through a period of maybe, like, selling a bigger house and moving into a smaller one or something like that. Or maybe there's resources that are had been like given to you that somehow now are not there for some reason or another. I know some people that recently had Pluto move out of their 8th house, and in both cases, there were actual deaths. There were deaths of people that they knew, family members, here and there. So with the god of the underworld, normally when you say, oh, the 8th house has this connotation with death, but usually people are like, it's metaphorical, so don't don't be worried, because it's usually some kind of metaphorical sense of death. But of course, sometimes with Pluto, a god of the underworld, traveling through the 8th house, there could very well be things that are surrounding actual death, actual inheritance. But the 8th house is also connected to the realm of anxiety or mental fear, or mental things that sort of try to take you down. Like it was a place of like insanity. So for most of us, of course, we're not going to become insane, but I would expect that with Pluto transiting this house over the next 20 years, there should very well be some very deep, powerful, cathartic moments that come through that do have something to do with fear in general that has to be overcome. And I guess the thing to look forward to is by the time Pluto leaves this house, it's like you have a whole new list of fears that you didn't have going in, but the fears that you used to have, you're no longer scared of. So that's kind of interesting. It's like you graduate one level of overcoming certain fears, but you leave, or Pluto leaves that house at a time where there's like new fears that maybe you're going to be dealing with over the next period of your life. So that's kind of interesting. But those are some of the house topics that are most likely going to be, certain moments or periods over the next 20 years that come up that you'll deal with as Pluto transits through this house and tries to transform things through those kinds of ways. Okay, let's go ahead and put Leo on the ascendant. Now, by the way, if you have any ways in which you can hear some of these house topics coming through already, I would love to hear, in the comment section, anything that you guys are okay to share in terms of what you see coming for you. I'm just giving very basic, broad interpretations of this. So I'd love to hear you guys, what you guys think about some of these, and maybe ways in which you could see somehow the pieces sort of fitting together, or the dots kind of being connected. Okay, but if you're a Leo rising, this is going to place Pluto as a planet entering into the 7th house, a place that was called the setting place in ancient astrology. And it's moving out of a place that was called bad fortune, the 6th house. So very, very interesting. The 6th house was associated as a place that was eternally toiling or laboring. And the 7th house was a place where things become finished and complete. So as the god of transformation moves out of this place that there seems to be no end in sight to the toil, to the day-to-day grind, as Pluto moves out of that place and into the 7th house, I have to imagine that certain things that may have been things that you've been really, really working very diligently and long-term are now beginning to come to a completion. So that part is really exciting. But now we sort of enter a period where the soul work is somehow needing to happen through interactions with intimate relationships or partnerships. So it could be any kind of partnership. It could be, somebody that you're in business with, a colleague, of course, somebody that you're married to, or in a relationship with somebody that you love. But the idea here is that there are these specific people in our lives that have some kind of intimate connection with us and are important to us. Those are the kinds of relationships that begin to go through a period of transformation. So there could be just new people that you become intimate with over the next 20 years or so that are just new to your life, or there could be, of course, changes to the relationships that you previously had. Now, I don't want to scare people, because this is always, when you get something like this, people always think, oh my God, my marriage is going to end. This is going to be awful. I don't think that in most cases that is what it is. And if it is that, it may be that it's something you prefer, but aren't yet aware of. So I wouldn't be worried about it, because either it's like, maybe something wakes you up to the fact that you're not happy, and it's just, you're going to come out the other side feeling much better anyway. but I wouldn't necessarily take it as like if you're happy and you have these really good relationships that everything is going to break down in those places. I would think of it as, how do people that you're really intimate with, how do they become like become a a helper in transformation, somebody that helps you see how to transform, experiences that come through their eyes that give you some perspective that cause a long-term period of transformation over the next 20 years. It's, if there wasn't anybody else but us on the planet, if we were just alone on the planet, our transformation would look quite different, right? But this is specifically a very interesting one because you see that it takes somebody else essentially to bring you the kind of change that is somehow in your destiny to walk through. So it's a very special time because it's not coming through work or children or health. It's most likely probably really about very important relationships that are the catalyst for deep, deep, powerful transformation. And so you come out the other side either with incredible relationships and people that are so important to you, that you've been through with a lot, that have helped you, that have been there, that maybe knew you when you were like a completely different person in terms of who you were in a relationship. Or you come out the other side with new people that that are, somehow you look back and it's like, wow, I used to be here with this person or hanging out with these people or in this situation. And now I'm in a place that is so different with these new people or these new situations that are so different I don't even recognize, and I can't imagine going back. It's something like that. So again, it's kind of a social place here. Okay, so let's go ahead and put Virgo on the ascendant. So if you're a Virgo rising, Pluto is now entering the 6th house and it is exiting the 5th house. So big change. It's really, really interesting. By the way, this line over to the lot of spirit here is just kind of ignore that. This lot of spirit through solar fire is something that is really hard to install into the chart. And because it's hard to install, I don't want to take it out. So normally I try to like move everything out of the chart to just highlight what we're talking about. But anyway, just ignore this opposition mark over to the lot of spirit here. Okay, so Pluto enters the 6th house. The 6th house has this connection to labor, to endless toil and labor. So this is what I think about this. Essentially, I'm thinking it's something like this. First of all, every person labors, whether we're born as a king or whether we're born as a slave. There is a kind of day-to-day work that everybody has to do. I don't think there's anybody alive that simply doesn't do any kind of work. Maybe there are some people, but by and large, for the most of us, no matter what our station is in life, there is some kind of toil that we engage in or that we're forced to do. Pluto enters this place and this realm, but this is really interesting because Pluto is the god of the underworld, and the 6th house was the first place that was below the setting. So as the sky turns, planets set in the west, like when you see the sun set, and then they enter the 6th house. Very, very, very interesting, right? So you have the god of the underworld moving into a house of the underworld below the setting. There is a sense that we all have to work. And if you're Virgo rising, it's that kind of work that somehow transforms the soul. So it's like the ways in which you to use like a farming analogy, the ways in which you put your hands into the soil, that kind of work that you do, whether that's a series of projects or a series of jobs, or it's just one big project that is coming online right now, I don't think it matters. I think the main thing is that whatever way in which you put your hands into the soil and you are laboring, that somehow has a very deep transformative effect right now on your soul. So your soul is almost being transformed through that realm of daily work. So first of all, I think we all work. So I don't think it's a matter of saying if you're Virgo rising, like Pluto's moving into this place that is all about work. So you're just going to become like a Pluto slave. I think it's more that it is probably likely that the kind of work will change, but I think it's more the essence of what you get out of the work is somehow more spiritually enlightening. But first, that old saying where, first you have to empty your cup so that it can be filled. It's like that. It's like the soul quality that you get from the experience of just doing that day-to-day labor, or that life labor, is somehow that needs to be transformed. That needs to be broken down. So it is probably likely that the kinds of work you do will change. The kinds of projects you do will change. There might be like one big project that you begin at this point that, it could be something like if you decide to, flip homes or something like that, and you begin this company and you're remodeling homes and then you're reselling them. That kind of labor over the long term, where you're engaging in like a new kind of business or a new thing that is going to take many, many, many years to see the fruits of, anything like that. Or whether it's just the soul changing experience of moving from menial task to menial task, even at home, even if you're just somebody that is like somebody that works from home, or takes care of children, or is a homemaker, I guess, in the traditional sense, or whatever. But anything that is laborious right now, somehow that experience is the dimension at which soul transformation occurs over the next 20 years. First, of course, things have to be broken down and then they have to be rebuilt. So I guess you could definitely expect kinds of toil and labor to change, be broken down, and then new ones to come in the place of the old ones. I guess that's probably a pretty safe delineation to make. So that is what I'm seeing if you are a Virgo rising. But if you already see or can connect the dots on maybe how some of these things are beginning to show up for you in your life, I'd love to hear about them. But I hope I haven't made this like, I don't know, kind of depressing, as it were, because I feel like sometimes with these more difficult houses, the delineations, especially when you're talking about Pluto, are just going to sound depressing. So I think Virgo risings, keep in mind, I'm not singling you out as somebody that is just going to be like a work slave. I'm just saying that we're all work slaves, and somehow, if you're Virgo rising, the soul is looking to transform through that particular kind of life experience right now at this time. Okay, let's go ahead and put Libra rising on the ascendant now, and this is going to place Pluto now into your 5th house of children and creativity, of recreation, of indulgence. And it's moving out of the 4th house of family and home and ancestry. So that's also a really interesting place. Pluto as a god of the underworld. Now we're talking about Pluto running through these very underworldly houses down at the bottom of the chart. But if you're a Libra rising, the last 20 years have seen intense dismantling and rebirth to the home, potentially to the family, and also to your inner sense of foundation. The 4th house has this connection to anything that provides some kind of psychological or inner foundational sense of well-being. And as Pluto has been traveling through the 4th house beginning in 2008 until now, it could be through the family or home, the physical location of the home, things that are going on in the family. But it also could have been Pluto transforming just that sense of foundational security that you have within your own being. And that is largely wrapping up right now. Whatever needed to be broken down and whatever was built in its place is established, and it's ready to run for, the foreseeable future. And now the concentration of Plutonian energy moves into the 5th house, a house that in ancient astrology was very and almost singularly connected with children, very connected with children. It had other things among it that it connected itself to. And one way I heard somebody put it, I think it was Demetra George in her fabulous book. she had this saying that said the fifth house was connected very much to children, but also it was any way that you could reproduce yourself and beget your own likeness. So what do we do when we have children? We essentially biologically reproduce ourselves. We make copies of ourselves. If you don't have children, or if that isn't something that is prominent in your life right now, Pluto entering the fifth could be about any kind of method, any kind of way that I guess we all have ways that we're recreating ourselves. So how does that process of recreating ourselves through art, through recreation or enjoyment, hobbies, things that we do for pleasure or fun, even through romance or relationships that are more casual, I guess you could say. But how do we recreate ourselves? How do we connect to our joy? How does this joyful energy of children and recreation or recreation, how is that going to be broken down? How are intense, deep, cathartic moments going to happen with things like this in our life? Of course, if you do have children, I would definitely say that this could be an area where children are maybe, leaving home and there's like an empty nesting kind of feeling, or maybe you could be having new children that need a lot of attention and care and love and support. But if it's not about children, it could be about any way in which you recreate yourself and that sense of art that you put out there to the world that has the essence of you inside of it. That is sort of the dimension that deep personal transformation is now beginning to break down and then be rebuilt. So very, very interesting. One thing that often comes with the fifth house is a little bit of this shadow side of self-indulgence. So I guess if there was anything to be a little bit cautious about over the next 20 years is that Pluto might be a god that leads some people into the shadows of self-indulgence. This was the house that was connected to gambling or drinking or going to bars and things like that. So, of course, you would want to watch out for things that become habit forming that will eventually have like a consequence down the road, where you don't want to be transformed in a way where it's like 20 years down the road you're in AA meetings because you began a period of like really indulging with drinking or something like that. So that's one way in which you sort of have to watch out with Pluto in the sign of Aquarius in the fifth house. But for most people, it's probably not going to be something like that. It's probably going to be more about children or the creative dimensions that we engage in with our lives. So that's a pretty interesting one, I'll say. Okay, now let's go ahead and put Scorpio on the ascendant here. If you're a Scorpio rising like myself, this is now moving Pluto into the fourth house of family and home. So it was moving out of the third house, a place that was traditionally called Goddess. And the last 20 years, there may have been major themes of transformation that have centered around the inner mental spaces, that third house kind of dimension that have a deep connection to the origins of home, family, town, ancestry, where power struggles may have occurred with family members, siblings, such as sisters or powerful women that were in your everyday environment. There could have been something like that. I know that there certainly was for myself. And now that these areas have been transformed and reformed, something connected to the home space, the family, the inner realm of your foundation will begin to dismantle in order to be reformed into something else. So this is really interesting for me because this is where it's really important to, if you're interested in going back to 2008 and taking a look at where Capricorn was or where Capricorn is in your birth chart, what whole sign that is, and come up with those, those highlight points that were really potent or powerful during the last 16 years that maybe were very cathartic and were transformative, but through those specific topics. The third house is a little bit of an elusive house to talk about, but it has this connection to the intermental landscapes. It's kind I almost think about it like how we remain a child, like in one way, where, it's located closely to the fourth house of home and family and of parents. So it's like, as adults out in the world, how do we retain that connection that we had to our experiences as children, to our parents, to the neighborhood or the environment, the culture that we grew up in? How do all of those things shape our mental landscapes? I think that over the last 16 years, Pluto had been working through those ethereal mental landscapes, transforming in a broad way what you think about everything from, it could be to the country that you live in, to experiences that you have as a person that identifies with a kind of culture, ethnicity, nationality, heritage. All of those very subtle realms that you identify with were the domains that Pluto was slowly transforming. So it's kind of a subtle place, but now that is largely done. And Pluto is moving into the fourth house. So now we have a much more like concrete kind of place that we see Pluto transforming. First, Pluto has to break down the home, potentially the family, potentially the way that we feel security as like a foundational sense within ourselves. And when I say breakdown, I don't mean that everything is descending into chaos and you'll lose your family and home and everything like that. I just mean that those are going to be that's going to be the channel through which Pluto begins this soul transformation. It'll be through moments at home, moments in the family or with the family. Of course, Pluto moving through this underworldly place, there could be people that you lose in the family. There could be people that you gain in the family, like myself, having a newborn child. Literally, the first time we brought our baby home was the day that Pluto was about to move into Aquarius, right on the edge of Capricorn. And then within 12 hours, Pluto had transitioned into Aquarius. So that gives you a little bit of the realm. There is also very powerful transformation that could possibly come through things like inheritance or ancestry or genetics, or like studying one's, like doing like an ancestry test and finding out, oh my gosh, I never knew I was Scottish. I thought all this time I was French, or, something like that. It could be ways in which something gets broken down and then something gets built that has a connection to ancestry or in heritage, or to parents. This could be a time where, of course, you might have to take care of parents, or parents are aging, and maybe there's a loss of the father, or there may be, I guess, a loss of something connected to the father. So I don't know what that would be, but that's sort of the realm that we have to sort of investigate when we talk about Pluto running through the fourth house. Could simply be that some of us buy homes, move to a new neighborhood, something like that. So, okay, so let's go ahead and put Sagittarius on the ascendant here. This is going to put Pluto into the third house. So like I was saying, for Scorpio Rising, Pluto in the third house is kind of, it's a little bit ethereal. It's really hard to grasp what the third house is about. But it has this connection. It was called the place of goddess. It has this connection with rituals. It was a place that was said to be out of time. In the ancient world, it was like in the city of Babylon. It was the place and the time which during the day you might visit a certain temple and pay homage to the god of that temple or the goddess of that temple. And it was sort of like, as you went into the temple, you moved out of the ordinary world into a special place, into a special magical time, and you connected with goddess. But it had this connection to rituals rather than religious doctrines. It was more about the ritual of lighting the incense and walking around the Buddha or something like that, rather than like reading the scriptures. But of course, the third house has a connection to the home and family. It has a connection to writing. So Pluto, over the last 16 years, was traveling to the second house of finances. So it makes me wonder if now that your craft skills and the way you cultivate investments has been rebuilt over the past 16 years, it is time for Pluto to disintegrate the sacred connection you have to your country, your family, your community, the mental space that connects you with your local environment or childhood. You may experience ideological divides between you and other family members, siblings, or the environment around you. There may be many new environments that come and go and provide transformation of the inner mental landscapes. So I think that I just wrote that as a note, but I think that that is kind of what we're getting at. But it's a little hard to see Pluto running through the third house. But think, what is your environment like? How is that going to be an avenue of transformation? The everyday sort of, if you were a fish, it would be like the water around you. It'd be like, as Pluto enters your third house, you're like living on a reef over here, and then a big storm comes, and now 20 years down the road, you're in a completely new ocean or something with different fish, new reef, and things like that. So there could be very powerful cultural changes, national changes. There could be cathartic or transformative moments through difficulties with siblings, power struggles with siblings or family members. And you could simply go through a process where you just feel at odds with people in your everyday environment, like on an ideological kind of level. And it's like your ideology is sort of transforming. And as that happens, it's sometimes hard to connect to people around you. And so there could be a space that you come out in 20 years where somehow your ideological, cultural connection to your city, environment, family, friends, all of that somehow is transformed, and there's like a new environment that is there all of a sudden, potentially new people. Maybe there's people that you're disassociated from after that, and maybe there's new people that you've gotten closer to, in old friends or family. So I would look to things surrounding the environment, the connection we have to childhood, the connection we have to our culture and how that culture shaped us as we grew up. Things transforming in those third house kinds of ways. Okay, let's go ahead and put Capricorn on the ascendant now. And this is a really amazing one, because of course we have Pluto leaving the first house, entering the second house. So this is another house in ancient astrology that was called the gateway of Hades. So the 8th house and the second house were called the idle place and the gateway of Hades. What in the world is that about? Well, the gateway of Hades in the second house was about things that were close to the first house. The first house is the place in the chart that represents us as bodies, as characters. It's the part of the chart that is solely about ourselves. It doesn't have anything to do with the fate or experience that we have as a soul inhabiting a body. It is the place that is the soul inhabiting the body, the place of the soul, the place of the identity, the place of the body itself. And Pluto has finished up largely in that realm, and it's now moving into this place that is connected to the things that the soul body needs during life. Often, of course, material kinds of things: money, job, skills, savings accounts, investments. That is the realm that we're entering now. We're sort of entering a transformational space that is going to be breaking down how is it that you save, how do you spend, what do you invest in, what do you spend money on, what is your relationship with the things that you need to support your physical life. That is the area that Pluto will begin to break down so that it can rebuild that picture or structure of financial security that you bring to yourself. You can think of the second house as almost like the personal garden. What you plant in there, what seeds you plant, one day will eventually fruit, and eventually that comes to you and you can eat it and it sustains you. So how, and this is really cool too, is that Pluto is a god of Hades. He's entering a place that was called the gateway of Hades. So the riches that are mythologically connected to Pluto here is really fascinating. It's as if there is going to be a transformation around the kinds of riches that you can cultivate for yourself personally. But first, you'll probably have to lose some of those previously gotten riches. So I would, I wouldn't worry, but I would definitely sort of buckle in, because that's a hard hitting place for anybody to have Pluto running through. I think it was Johnny Depp has Pluto natally in the second house. And of course, he's suffered some pretty major losses, of money. He's also gained major gains of financial security. But that is the theme, is those things that we cultivate. Sometimes we cultivate things that don't work out and they die. But that is what propels us to cultivate something else. So for Capricorn, I think it's a little bit more easier of a delineation to come to. It's sort of in that realm. Okay, let's go ahead and put Aquarius on the ascendant now. If you are an Aquarius rising, Pluto is beginning to enter through the first house, and it has ran its course through the 12th house, a place that was called a place of evil spirits. So Pluto has left the place of evil spirits, and it has entered the place of birth, the whole house that was rising, or the whole sign that was rising as you were being born. Pluto is entering that space. It's entering a place that's connected to personal identity, the character. It's like let's say you got hired to play a character, in a movie. And this place would be like, okay, what kind of character did you get hired to play? Who do you feel like you should be every day that you wake up? What kind of clothing do you put on yourself? Are you a person that says, life is a game and I can sort of be who I want to be, whether that's, somebody that's an individualist, kind of a little bit different or odd. Or am I somebody that is really, connected to what is mainstream? Do I not want to rock the boat? Aquarius Rising has that personality that goes back and forth between being somebody that advocates the status quo, and not only advocates it, but sort of is the status quo. It's like they're like, I am the example of what we should all be right now socially, right? But then at other times, it's like Bob Marley, who rebels against that. So Pluto entering this very powerful house of self, identity, character, body. You have to wonder if this isn't one of the more existential places to have this transit running through. And again, Pluto is such a slow moving planet that Pluto only goes through a handful of signs during the course of anybody's lifetime. So to have Pluto running through your first house, that is definitely powerful. Now, here is the thing where I could make a sort of trope or trite delineation. And I don't want to do that, because the obvious delineation to make for Pluto entering the first would be something like, oh, over the next 20 years, you're gonna transform. Your identity is gonna transform. Your character is gonna transform. And it's like, well, yeah, whose character and identity isn't gonna change over 20 years? But here, the nuance is that it's like the ideas that you have about yourself are so potent and so powerful. There is definitely a dark night of the soul. This is like, this is almost like an LSD trip where you take some mushrooms or you take some acid and you sort of just enter your DNA, and you have profound transformation through what you are, unrelated to other people, unrelated to any worldly kinds of things like, oh, this is the kind of work that I do, or this is, I have these children, or this is my bank account. This is much more like we're gonna block all other things out, and it's just like this intense psychedelic trip where you just go into you, and there's an deep examination of character. And with Aquarius being such a mental sign, it's like there's going to be probably a period where who you think you are definitely gets broken down. There are moments of just intense cathartic releases of the ideas of who you are, what you are to yourself. And then, of course, you emerge out the other side when Pluto leaves the first house as a person that is unrecognizable. And of course, this will happen to everybody on the planet from now until 20 years. But with Aquarius rising, it's just much more concentrated and intense. Not everybody is going to go through those very personal, existential, just solely about themselves kind of experiences. I'll give you a quick example of this. My son is an Aquarius rising, and within 12 hours of Pluto moving into his first house, a new sibling has entered the home. A baby has come in, his baby sister, and he's 8 years old. So even though his life isn't that hasn't gone that many miles yet, there hasn't been that much time for the chart to blossom and bloom over the course of a lifetime. So it's hard to say what this could mean, but definitely this is going to be a potent and powerful moment that begins right off the bat with something that says, hey, it's no longer mom and dad and me. It's mom and dad, and now everything that I knew about myself, I'm not just me anymore. And I told him, I said, you know what's good about having a sister or a sibling is that one day, hopefully long time into the future, I won't be here anymore. And mom won't be here. At some point, everybody that's older than you is most likely going to pass on. But this sibling that you're blessed to have at this point is younger than you, which means that if everything goes right, she'll be with you until the very end. She'll be your family after I'm gone, after we're gone. That's really powerful. And so it's not going to be the whole time over the course of 20 years that he's going to have these intense moments. But the intense moments that come that have transformative power will be through the dimension of self-examination, a character breakdown and rebuilding. So of course we all go through this. I don't want to say it sounds trite when I say it that way, but there's a nuance there with it. So hopefully I have articulated that in a way that you get a sense of it. Okay, now let's put Pisces on the ascendant, last and certainly not least to all the Pisces out there. We have Pluto entering the 12th house. And as it was for Virgo, I don't want to make this sound like it's just all going to be bad, but we had Pluto leaving the 11th house just as Pluto enters the 12th, of course. So since 2008, there has been that interesting transformation. And that's sort of like what I was talking about for Aries risings, where Pluto has been working through this realm that is very social, maybe has a connection to aspirations or goals for the future, things like that. And it's really interesting, Pluto having gone through the 11th house over the last 16 years, how the 11th place is such a social place, and how the 12th place is connected to kinds of experiences or places that tend to be maybe a little bit isolating, like the 12th house that has a connection to hospitals where you're trying to heal to get better, prisons where you're incarcerated and they don't let you out. So definitely this is probably a little bit more of a scarier sounding transit to have over the next 20 years. But I think the main theme to walk away from with Pluto entering the 12th house is that the avenue of transformation occurs in places that you have to be careful about things that lead you away from yourself. What are very powerful instincts or ideological instincts that are going to be leading you away from what is good or healthy for yourself that you have now that need to be broken down, and hopefully new ones don't form in its place. But also, what kinds of people or situations are in your life that also just are things that have a tendency to lead you further away from yourself. They have a tendency to lead you into a place that is lost. There could definitely be power struggles with people that just don't care about you. They don't care whether you sink or swim. And we all have people like that from time to time that come into our lives. So it's not that you're going to have that more than anybody else, but this is an important time that those kinds of experiences are so powerful to us, or to Pisces Rising, that is the way that transformation happens on the soul level. So, of course, you have to be careful about things that are just detrimental to yourself. But because Aquarius is such a mental kind of sign, I think it could really have to do with ideas, ideologies, some notion of the right way that everything should be, that at the end of the day just simply are not good. Now Pluto will begin to break down some of the old ways in which we do that to ourselves, or it might break down situations that we're connected to, people or situations that have that effect on us. And as Pluto moves through this secretive house, I think Pluto gets to the end, and 20 years from now, it's like we've had these incredibly powerful, transcendental like experiences. It's almost like we could come out the other side with a new spirituality, or a new connection to belief, or there could be like things that are like yogic practices, or just things that are very, very transcendental and almost spiritual like. Pluto is going to take you to the darkest recesses of existence, I think, in the 12th. And you'll come out the other side. And of course, for Pisces Rising, Pisces natives are people that can get lost in those Piscean waters. So, of course, this is probably a time where you really go swimming in some places that are quite dangerous. But I wouldn't be worried because, again, there may be a certain amount of fate that comes along with that. There may be also some struggles with health that were always written in your birth chart that you were going to have to face at some point. So this is not to bring up any fearful situations, because coming out the other side, Pluto will give you almost like a sense of enlightenment that brings you back to yourself as Pluto moves into the first house. So that is some of the more powerful ways that you could see Pluto moving through the 12th house. So I hope that doesn't sound overly scary, but life is very precious and it's powerful, but we don't grow without these very intense, uncomfortable, and dark things that come in and unfortunately, break us down. But then Pluto doesn't just leave us stranded there. He rebuilds us, So it's never something to be scared of with Pluto. Most people, usually when you ask them, well, would you have gone through that experience again? People during the time that they're having an intense Pluto transit are always going to say, oh, I just want this to end. This is just no fun, and I can't take it anymore, right? And then Pluto lets up, and then he comes back again. Then he lets up, and he comes back again, because he's such a slow-moving planet. But after it finally does end, many, many years down the road, almost nearly everybody, if you ask them, well, wow, so that was very difficult and challenging and hard, maybe even scary. There was dealing with a lot of darkness. Would you go through that again? Almost everybody will tell you, well, yeah, I would, because now it has made me who I am, and I'm better off, So I've gained. in the end of the day, I am better off. I've gained. I'm myself in a way that is better than I was before, I guess you could say. So generally, I'm not trying to sugarcoat it, but generally that is the kind of response that people talk about when Pluto transits have passed and you ask them that question. So anyway, that's what I have for today. Sorry, this has been a little bit, I've been tripping over my words a little bit today. I'm just running on a few hours of sleep. So I appreciate you guys sticking with me. And I am going to upload this and get some sleep. But please leave in the comment section any comments you have, or any ways in which you see Pluto potentially moving into a new house for you. And you can also go back again and look at the past 16 years and which ways that Pluto showed up for you moving through that particular house. Those are really, really interesting and fascinating stories. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. I'll be back again next week with some more astrology videos. And until then, I hope you have a really great weekend and take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye.